Last we left off, the party ascended Mount Camford through the dense jungle. Their ascension had not so easily came, as they had to fight their way through the horde of frenzied primates as they descended to the city of Lurton below. Reaching the summit of the mountain, they found it to be a flat and rocky landscape that the primates had once made their home. Without much time to investigate, out from the vine-covered cave entrance appeared a gargantuan crystal dragon, seemingly angered by some unknown wrongdoing. The party fought valiantly, eventually felling the ancient dragon, but not before losing a dear friend that had been with them since the beginning of their journey. Now the party looks ahead into the cave to accomplish their goals. Welcome to Narrative Tales, where we transform our epic tabletop adventures into immersive audio stories. Dive into captivating narratives filled with daring quests, intense battles, and rich character development. Each episode brings our thrilling campaigns to life, offering a unique blend of storytelling and fantasy. Whether you're a fan of immersive tales or enjoy epic adventures, Narrative Tales delivers excitement and drama straight to your ears. Subscribe and join us on this journey through fantastical world, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest episodes. The massive crystalline body of the ancient dragon lay still, its iridescent scales catching the sunlight. Nearby, the shredded remains of Albus were strewn across the rocky terrain, a grim reminder of the battle's cost. Rexar knelt beside Albus's mangled form, his expression somber. "He's gone," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. Skiven approached, his eyes fixed on the lifeless body. "We should make use of what we have," he muttered, patting Albus's pockets. "We wouldn't want his death to be for nothing." Morse folded his arms, his tone practical. "What do we do? Bury him here? Burn him? We can't just leave him here." "He wasn't that big," Rexar said, glancing at the remains. "We could pile some rocks over him, give him a proper burial. Or a vigil," Morse suggested. "It's a sign of respect, and we can honor him before moving on." The party nodded in agreement, setting to work gathering stones and materials to cover Albus. Rexar, though silent, worked with meticulous care, ensuring the burial mound was stable and dignified. The group also salvaged anything of value from Albus's belongings, a few weapons, some gold, and a vial of black smear, which Morse claimed. With Albus laid to rest, the group turned their attention to the dragon's carcass. Its shimmering scales and crystalline form were a treasure trove for anyone with crafting skills. Morse stepped forward, his determination evident. "I'm going to skin it," he announced. "And I want those crystals for arrowheads." "Same here," Skiven added, inspecting the dragon's body. "We might as well make use of this victory." As the party divided the dragon's remains, scales, crystals, and teeth, they took a moment to reflect on their loss in the hard-won battle. The mountain air was thick with the scent of blood and scorched earth, a testament to the fierce combat that had unfolded. Meanwhile, back in Chloria, a new figure entered the city's bustling streets. Reuven, who had been separated from the group earlier, found himself seated in a familiar tavern. He nursed a drink, his thoughts wandering as he awaited the other's return. A tall, well-built man approached him, his sleeves rolled up and his appearance reminiscent of a busboy or bartender. "What can I get you?" the man asked, his tone polite. Reuven looked up and smiled faintly. "Mead, please." The man nodded, disappearing briefly before returning with a pint. "Name's Galahad," he said, extending a hand. Reuven shook it firmly. "Reuven, you're new here, I take it." Galahad chuckled. "Not exactly. I've seen you and your friends around. You've brought quite a bit of business to this place. I even overheard a bit of your adventures." Reuven leaned back, studying Galahad with a critical eye. "What have you heard?" "Bits and pieces," Galahad replied with a knowing smirk. "Enough to know that Mount Camford isn't a place I'd willingly visit." The two shared a brief laugh before falling into comfortable silence. Reuven, still grappling with the events atop the mountain, found solace in the quiet camaraderie of the tavern. Reuven sat at the corner table in the tavern, staring out the rain-streaked window. The muted sound of distant thunder matched his mood, weighed down by 3 days of unanswered questions. His companions had set off toward Mount Camford, and Reuven hadn't heard from them since. He had hoped for word, a sign, but nothing had come. Behind the bar, Galahad polished a glass, his sharp features and well-kept appearance a testament to his pride in the establishment. His discerning eyes flickered toward Reuven, lingering for a moment before he approached, breaking the silence. "You've been here a while, my friend," Galahad remarked, his tone warm but probing. 3 days, if I'm not mistaken?" Reuven sighed and looked over. "That's right. I've been waiting for news of my companions, but nothing. I supposed I've started to worry." Galahad leaned against the table, folding his arms. "If it were me, I'd go after them. I know you're not the type to sit idle forever." Reuven hesitated. "I told myself they'd be fine. They're traveling with someone I'd describe as a wall with legs, after all. But maybe you're right. If something's happened..." "I'll come with you," Galahad offered, his tone resolute. "You'll need someone to watch your back." Reuven gave a grateful nod. "Thank you, Galahad. I could use the help." As Galahad straightened and prepared to head upstairs to gather a few supplies, another figure approached from the dimly lit corner of the room. He was a man of average build, with sharp, focused eyes and travel-worn attire. His movements were steady, deliberate, as if every step carried a purpose. The man addressed Galahad directly. "Do you have any sake?" Galahad tilted his head thoughtfully. "Sake? Not a common request around here, but I might have some in the cellar. I'll take a look." As Galahad stepped away, Reuven turned to the newcomer. "I couldn't help but overhear you're not from around here." The man inclined his head slightly. "That's correct. My name's Hammond. I'm a traveler on the hunt for ancient artifacts. I came here looking for work, or leads, anything to push me closer to my goal." Reuven studied him for a moment. "We're heading to Mount Camfort. If you're interested in an adventure, you're welcome to join us. From what you've said, it sounds like your expertise in magic and artifacts might come in handy." Hammond smiled faintly. "I'd be honored, and I think you'll find my skills useful." When Galahad returned, Reuven introduced the two. "Galahad, this is Hammond. He'll be joining us." "Good," Galahad said with a nod. "The more the merrier." Before departing, Galahad handed over the keys to his ward, Beth. "Hold down the fort while I'm away," he instructed her. "Run the tavern as if it were your own." With their plans made, the trio set off. The first leg of their journey followed well-maintained roads that stretched northward. But as the days passed, the road narrowed and became rougher, transforming into dirt trails that wound into a dense, untamed jungle. Fog began to roll in, thick and heavy, clinging to their clothes and making each breath feel labored. The smell of tar hung in the air, oppressive and foreboding. The jungle itself seemed to close in around them, but the three pressed forward, determined to find Reuven's companions, no matter what awaited them in the shadows of Mount Camfort. As Reuven, Galahad, and Hammond pushed deeper into the jungle, the air grew heavy with acrid scent of smoke and the sound of chaos ahead. The cries of warriors and the guttural roars of animals mixed with the bassy echoes of something massive crashing through the trees. Entire jungle giants snapped and fell, their roots torn from the earth. Whatever lay ahead was unlike anything the trio had faced before. Hammond broke the silence. "Whatever is causing this, it's not small." Reuven nodded grimly. "And we're heading right into it." The smoke thickened as they neared the source, its scent shifting to something more unsettling, burning hair and seared flesh. A small monkey, its fur smoldering, darted past them with a panicked shriek, disappearing into the underbrush. Ahead, a battle raged. Galahad drew a sharp breath. "Gnomes," he said, motioning toward the scene. Dozens of gnomes, some mounted on wolves and others armed with spears and saps, fought fiercely against a horde of primates. The monkeys ranged in size, some as small as a halfling, others towering over the battlefield. The clash was chaotic, the jungle alive with cries of pain, snarls, and the dull thuds of weaponry striking flesh. The trio exchanged uncertain glances, but before they could act, the sound of the fight faded into the distance. Whatever conflict was taking place here, it wasn't their fight. Not yet. Meanwhile, on Mount Camfort, the rest of the party stood amidst the aftermath of their battle with the ancient crystal dragon, Merolithar. Its massive form lay broken on the mountaintop, the icy winds biting at their wound. Exhausted but victorious, they gathered what they could from the dragon's remains. Even Rexar, with his legendary strength, could not carry an entire dragon. "We've got to make this trip worth it," Moore said, wincing as he clutched his side. "But I'm spent. We need to rest." Rexar rolled his eyes. "Fine, but not too long. I don't trust this mountain." He glanced toward the gaping maw of the cave where Merolithar had emerged. "We should check the cave once we're ready." "All right," Rexar announced after a time. "Rest's over. Let's move." The cave's entrance loomed ahead, dark and silent. Lighting a torch, they ventured inside, its flickering glow illuminating a cavern that sparkled with traces of green. The walls glimmered with veins of a crystalline material, but much of the cave appeared destroyed. Piles of fine green dust lay scattered about, and jagged rubble hinted at violent excavation. "Vertiflux," Skiven muttered, inspecting the material. This cave was once lined with it. Someone's been here, and they weren't subtle about it. They must have used explosives to mine it quickly. Rexar grunted, his crimson tattoos glinting faintly in the torchlight. Whatever they left behind is ours now. Gather as much as you can carry. The party began scooping up the fine material, mindful of its value. As they worked, Morse paused, frowning. Do you hear that? A low rumbling echoed through the cavern, growing louder. The ground beneath their feet began to shake, and a deafening crack split the air. Below them, a fissure opened, revealing a glowing river of molten lava. It's a volcano! Morse shouted as the walls began to crumble around them. Forget the vertiflux! Run! Rexar bellowed, leading the charge toward a large opening on the far side of the cave. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling, narrowly missing the group as they sprinted for their lives. They emerged into the blinding daylight just as the mountain groaned beneath them, spewing ash and molten rock into the air. The entire peak trembled violently, a cascade of fire and destruction chasing them down the slope. Breathless and battered, the group stumbled to safety, the now distant peak of Mount Camfort erupting into a fiery beacon on the horizon. As the party hurried down the mountain, the rocky path proved uneven and treacherous. They scrambled through remnants of the primates' makeshift bedding and nests scattered across the terrain. Smoke began to curl its way up the slopes, visible in the distance as the group descended. Where's the fire line? One of them asked, urgency rising. We'll head in the general direction we came from, another replied. We can use that as a guide. A quick survival check revealed faint, trampled trails carved out by the mountain's previous inhabitants. These paths offered the fastest route down while minimizing risk of falling debris from the shaking mountain. As they neared the fire line, they paused to assess their options. The flames burned high, marking the boundary they needed. Should we jump it? Morse suggested. No, we'd get scorched, came the reply. Maybe we can smother a section of it? After some trial and error with dirt and damp leaves, the group managed to create a narrow, smoldering path across the flame. It would be hot, but manageable if they moved quickly. They bolted through the makeshift crossing, avoiding injury. On the other side, the sounds of battle grew louder. Echoes of primal screams and war cries accompanied by the deep, resonating bellow of something enormous. Looking out, they glimpsed the chaos unfolding at the base of the mountain. The group paused, their breaths catching as they watched an incredible sight unfold. The battlefield was chaos. Gnomes and monkeys clashed in a frenzy of smoke, screams, and flying debris. Amid the turmoil, both groups had managed to find moments of relative stillness as they crept through the edges of the conflict. Each group's focus shifted to a distant but unmistakable sight. The tiger statue. The massive, quartz-like figure stood out even amidst the destruction, gleaming as if untouched by the violence surrounding it. The light refracted off its surface, giving it an otherworldly aura. But then, cracks began to form along its surface. Small pieces of the pristine stone broke away, revealing a living, shifting form beneath. Both groups froze, caught in the shared realization of what was unfolding. The tiger shed its stony exterior with a deliberate and almost ritualistic grace. Its movements grew fluid as it rose to a gargantuan size, its glowing eyes filled with a primal intensity that rivaled the towering ape wreaking havoc in the gnome city. It moved with terrifying precision, its claws cleaving through the invading primates like a blade through paper. Each swipe sent the smaller creatures flying, their momentum broken by the sheer force of the blows. The tiger statue's focus, however, seemed fixed on a singular, enormous target, the towering gorilla-like beast that dwarfed even the largest of the primates. The massive ape roared in defiance, slamming its fists into the earth and uprooting entire trees as though they were twigs. Its slow, lumbering movements betrayed its immense power. At one point, it rose to its full height, bellowing so loudly that even the earth seemed to tremble into submission. The tiger, unyielding, darted forward, crashing into the gargantuan creature with a ferocity that sent shockwaves across the battlefield. Each strike from the tiger was met with a counter from the ape. The two locked in a deadly dance of primal power and predatory precision. Trees splintered, the ground quaked, and the air filled with the roars of howls in the titanic struggle. The group could only watch in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. Awe and fear warred in their minds as the enormity of the moment pressed down on them. "What are we even supposed to do here?" Morse whispered, breaking the silence. "Nothing," Skiven replied grimly. "That's not a fight we can win." Still, the sight of the animated tiger holding its own against the monstrous ape filled them with a strange sense of hope. Perhaps, against all odds, the city might survive this onslaught. For now, though, survival remained. They turned their attention back to the tower, preparing to regroup with the others. They pressed forward, navigating through carnage, their movements purposeful and silent. Among the chaos, they spotted familiar faces, or at least one familiar. "Is that Reuven?" Rexar muttered, squinting through the haze. Reuven stood with two unfamiliar figures. The group exchanged whispers, debating whether to approach. "It is Reuven," Rexar confirmed, his eyes narrowing. They moved forward cautiously, their stealth aided by the overwhelming noise of the battle. Rexar approached, recognition flickering in his eyes. "We can't talk here. Albus isn't with me, but we need to leave. Now." The group exchanged uneasy glances but nodded in agreement. The sounds of destruction, the massive ape's roar, and the cries of the gnomes drove home the urgency of the situation. As they began retreating together, the battlefield seemed to shift once more. Morse tightened his grip on his crossbows. "We're not fighting that thing," he asked, his tone half joking, half serious. "No," Reuven snapped. "We're leaving now." As the party turned to flee together, the sounds of the tiger and ape locked in combat grew louder, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. The tiger statue was alive, and its fury was unmatched. They didn't look back. There was no time. As the gargantuan tiger wrestled the massive primate, both groups of adventurers watched, frozen in awe. The tiger, protector of this mysterious land, charged forward with breathtaking speed, leaping onto the ape's back. Its claws tore into the beast's thick hide as it wrestled the creature to the ground. The battle was brutal, primal. The tiger clamped its jaws around the primate's throat, and with one powerful twist, it ripped the creature's neck open. Blood and viscera spilled across the battlefield as the ape let out a final deafening bellow before collapsing lifeless. For a brief moment, silence fell. Then, the mountain erupted. The dormant volcano exploded with a catastrophic force, shaking the very earth beneath the city. Ash and lava burst into the sky, blotting out the stars and turning the night into a fiery dawn. Trees that had been uprooted by the primate's rampage were hurled aside like matchsticks as the mountain's peak disintegrated in a massive plume of molten destruction. Everyone struggled to stay upright, the tremors threatening to throw them to the ground. Even as the ground buckled and the heat grew unbearable, the tiger turned toward the city. It returned to the fountain basin from which it had come, its colossal form still towering above the gnomish buildings. There, it let out a low, resonant roar as a shimmering blue dome began to expand from its form. The protective barrier unfolded across the city, its light growing brighter as lava and ash began to rain down from above. The molten rock collided with the dome, spreading across its surface in a fiery wave before cooling into obsidian. Inside, the city was plunged into eerie darkness. The protective dome had saved them from certain death. As the last remnants of the mountain's eruption settled, the chaos on the battlefield began to subside. The surviving monkeys, panicked by the earth-shattering tremors and the death of their leader, scattered into the wilderness. For a moment, the city was safe. Rexar, still catching his breath, pulled Reuven aside. "We need to talk, away from the others," he said, switching to Elven to being overheard. The two moved a few paces from the group, leaving the others to recover. Reuven listened quietly as Rexar relayed the grim news of Albus's fate. "The dragon caught us off guard," Rexar said, his voice heavy. "It was an ancient crystal beast, brought to life by miners who disturbed a powerful vein of vertiflux. Albus fought bravely, but he didn't make it. We buried him at the mountain's peak, though that grave is gone now, along with the summit." Reuven's expression hardened. "Albus deserves better, but I'm glad he didn't fall without a fight." "I recovered his belongings," Rexar continued. "I'd like to return them to Aurelil when we can. She deserves to know what happened." As Rexar and Reuven exchanged words, the rest of the group began piecing together what had happened. The new arrivals, including Skiven, drew some curious looks, especially as tales of his exploits against the dragon came to light. Meanwhile, Skiven scanned the area for signs of leadership among the gnomes. His keen eyes landed on the gnomish leader, slumped against a tree and breathing heavily, his wounds evident even from a distance. The party gathered near the wounded gnome elder, who slumped against a tree. His clothes were torn and blood still seeped from his injuries. Skiven, ever pragmatic, approached him with a berry in hand. "Are you conscious, sir?" Skiven asked, his small hands hovering just above the gnome's arm. The gnome gave a weak nod. "Yes, I'm still here." Skiven held out a good berry. "This might help. It's a full meal in one bite, but don't eat too many, trust me." The gnome took the berry with trembling hands and ate it. A small bit of color returned to his face and some of his wounds closed. "Would you like another?" Skiven offered. The gnome hesitated before nodding. "Thank you. It helps." As the second berry took effect, Moore stepped forward, addressing Skiven. "Ask him what we can do to help get the village back in shape. It's a disaster here." Skiven translated, his rat-like snout twitching. The gnome replied in a hushed tone, his voice trembling. "He says Kaltera the Guardian awoke once more and saved the village," Skiven relayed. "Apparently they think they're safe for now, but he doesn't seem to know how long we'll be stuck under this obsidian dome." Moores frowned. "That's great and all, but how do we leave? Ask him that." Skiven turned back to the gnome. "How do we get out of this protective dome? You know, if magma wasn't enough of a problem?" The gnome sighed, shaking his head. "The Guardian's shield is meant to protect us. It will fade in time when the danger is past. For now, we wait." Rexar crossed his arms, his voice cutting through the conversation. "Tell him I'm real sorry we didn't take down King Kong. It's what heroes like us do." Skiven tilted his head. "Speaking louder doesn't make him understand you, Rexar." "I'm just saying," Rexar grumbled. "He should know we helped." Moores waved off the moment. "Fine. Ask him this instead. What's the deal with the tiger statue? Is it magical or something? What brought it back to life?" Skiven translated, then turned to the group. "It's an avatar. Gods sometimes manifest as physical forms when their followers are in desperate need. That tiger, Cartera, promised long ago to protect this village, and I guess that promise still stands." Hammond, who had been listening silently, finally spoke up. "I'll admit, I didn't expect a giant stone tiger to wrestle an ape to death. Impressive." Skiven snickered. "Yeah, and now we're stuck under the same tiger's protection. Convenient." The gnome elder interrupted. "Feel free to look around the village. Some of our supplies may have survived." Moores nodded. "Thanks. We'll do what we can to help." Rexar grinned at Skiven. "You're low to the ground. Go sniff out anything useful, rat man." Skiven scowled. "You know, for a big guy, you sure are bad at teamwork." "I get the job done," Rexar shot back, then turned to Hammond. "What's your deal, anyway? You some kind of swordsman or sorcerer?" Hammond straightened. "Both. The slavers who raised me forced to fight with blades, but their curse left me with innate magic. I've started to harness it, though it's hardly by choice." Rexar shrugged. "Well, if you got any booze, I'll take it, barkeep." Skiven sighed. "He's hopeless." The party gathered near the obsidian dome, debating how to escape. The air was still thick with heat, and the charred surface of the protective layer shimmered faintly. Moores was the first to speak, adjusting his gear. "So we're trapped under this thing, huh? Rats dig, right? That's an option." Rexar groaned. "Digging? We need something faster. What else do we have?" Skiven snorted. Cool. Well, some of us here might help, especially with manners." If you're talking about Rexar, don't worry," Reuben said with a smirk. "He's not very smart, and it gets worse. We don't let him talk to most things." "I'll take that as a compliment," Rexar grumbled. Shifting topics, Moores asked, "Did you bring any merchandise worth using, like explosives maybe?" Skiven grinned. "You mean my firearm?" He held up his musket. "It's quite an exquisite piece, but I doubt it'll do much against its dome. The thing works pretty simply. Explosive here, metal ball there, and then boom. The ball flies out. Just trust me, it sounds cooler when you see it in action." Moore shook his head. "Right, so it's not that strong. What about other tools? This dome has to have a weak spot." Reuben raised a brow. "I've got ninja stars, not that they'll do much." "See," Moore said, pointing at Skiven, "at least he admits it." "I say we just blow it up," Skiven interjected. "Someone has to have gunpowder." Skiven thought for a moment. "The gnomes might have a spare barrel somewhere. I can whip up some gunpowder if we need it, but we'll need the fire source to ignite it." Rexar smirked. "I've got burning hands." Skiven shot him a glare. "Please don't grab it. You'll kill us all." "Fair point," Moore said. "But if we get the gunpowder, we could light it from a distance. It'll be risky, but it's our best bet." Skiven rolled his eyes. "Yeah, sure. Go for it." Dragon Slayer? Rexar ignored the sarcasm and prepared to strike. He entered his blood rage, muscles rippling with enhanced strength. With a roar, he swung his weapon at the dome, the blade sparking against the brittle obsidian. The first hit chipped away a large fragment, while the second left a deep crack. "Step aside," Moores said, readying his hand crossbows. "Let the archer work." Rexar grinned and backed up. Morse fired a series of arrows at the crack spot, each one widening the fracture. "That's progress," Skiven admitted. "But we'll need the gunpowder to finish the job." The air was thick with heat and tension as the party stood beneath the massive obsidian dome. The crackling of lava outside was a constant reminder that they needed to act quickly. They had no easy way out, but they were determined to escape. "All right," Morse said, rolling up his sleeves. "If we're going to get out of here, we need something powerful. A big bang, something that'll break this dome." "I've got the scales," Rexar said gruffly, rubbing his own. Though he didn't seem keen on you. "But they're not going to help." "Hold up," Morse interjected. "I'm not using my skills for this. Let's see if we can get something else to do the job." With that, Skiven began discussing with the gnomes, explaining what he needed. Gunpowder, barrels, small if possible, but anything that'll work. The gnomes weren't able to provide everything, but they pointed him in the direction of natural ingredients that could be found in the wild. Armed with that information and his knowledge of nature, Moore set off to gather the necessary components. Meanwhile, Hammond was looking for barrels, searching the area for anything intact. "I'll go find something that can hold all this," he said. "I've got a feeling we won't be finding any pristine barrels, but we'll make do. I'll scout around the area, see if anything survived the chaos. We'll need everything we can get," Skiven said as he moved off, looking for any useful materials or remnants from the earlier battle. Rexar offered to assist with the physical tasks. "I can carry the barrels, make sure they're moved into position." "I'll be the spark," Hammond added with a smirk indicating his fiery abilities. "When the time comes, I'll light the fuse." The party worked in harmony, gathering materials and putting everything together, with Skiven at the forefront gathering ingredients for the gunpowder, and Hammond collecting the barrels. The team slowly pieced together their makeshift explosive device. Once everything was in place, Skiven stood by, giving final instructions. "We've got the barrels filled with enough gunpowder. Now we just need a safe distance and a spark." He checked everything once more before returning to Hammond. "Ready to light this?" "Always," Hammond said, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "All right," Moore said, knocking an arrow and Hammond igniting it with a small flame. "Once this lights, we'll need to back up fast. Ready?" "Do it," Rexar barked. Moores loosed the flaming arrow, and it sailed through the air in a perfect arc, striking the barrel. The group braced themselves, but nothing happened. A tense silence filled the air. "Shouldn't they?" Skiven started, but the explosion suddenly roared to life, the delay heightening the impact. The shockwave knocked them back, and chunks of obsidian rained down as sunlight poured through the new opening. "We're free," Hammond said with a smile, brushing off bits of debris. "Rats dig," Skiven muttered under his breath, chuckling. "Turns out explosions worked better." The explosion had done its job. The dome had cracked wide enough for them to crawl through. The way out was clear. "Thank the gods," Skiven muttered, wiping dust from his face. "Let's get out of here." Moores took a deep breath, wiping the sweat from his brow. "All right, let's go." The group gathered their things and made their way toward the opening, the destruction of the dome testament to their combined efforts. As they crawled through the hole, they turned to thank the gnomes, who had given them what little help they could. Moores nodded to the gnome leader. "We owe you. I hope we didn't cause too much trouble." The gnome smiled, nodding. "No, it is fine. You've done well. I hope you accomplish whatever it is you need to." "Thanks," Moore said before the group began moving on. "Now let's see where this road takes us."